It is Monday, October 31st, and this is the Wiltfong Whiparound. Happy Halloween, everyone. You see, I'm wearing my orange today, getting in the spirit. And as always, I'm joined by the Director of Recruiting for 24/7 Sports, Steve Wiltfong. Before we start, I just want to remind everyone to like this video and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening as a podcast, make sure to give us a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. So many things to talk about from a fun week 9, a busy week 9, a lot of big weekends. But Steve, before we start, since it is Halloween, one of the best days of the year, especially for kids, I want to ask first and foremost, what's your favorite candy? You know, when you were out trick or treating as a young Steve Wiltfong, what was that one thing you would always hope to see? Whether it was in your pillowcase, whether it was in your candy bag, what is your treat of choice?
Well, young Steve Wiltfong loved the Milky Ways and Snickers. Still, obviously, enjoy those candies, but the 100 grand is kind of like my quest that I will be on the lookout for when I'm walking with my kids. We bought 4 bags of Costco's candy here, and I've already kind of picked over and grabbed a few 100 grands out of there. So the Wiltfong house will not be handing out very many 100 grands. They've already been eaten
Nice.
here.
Nice. I'm personally I'm a big Tootsie Roll guy. I know not a lot of people like Tootsie Rolls, but I love Tootsie Rolls.
So you got Tootsie Rolls, and then you got the Tootsie like rectangle block things. Are those all the same?
Yes, they're all, whether it's the long Tootsie Rolls, the short ones, the block ones, even a Tootsie Pop I could do with. I'm a big Tootsie Roll guy. And I personally am not trick-or-treating today. I'm going to my brother-in-law's and we'll be trick-or-treating with my niece. So I know as I go searching, I'll definitely be on the lookout for some Tootsie Rolls tonight. But Steve, it was a big weekend in college.
I also don't mind when they hand out the beers. You know,
yes,
and
yes,
the Wiltfongs,
of course.
When I'm not walking with my kids, we also hand out beers at the Wiltfong.
Oh, I might have to, just for that. I might have to take a trip tonight to Indy. I might have to head on over
just to get a beer, man. They said you got liquor stores, Lance.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I might have to sneak some in my pockets as I'm walking around.
It's koozie weather, dry,
it is,
upper 50s. So
it's a nice fall day here in New Jersey too. But Steve, a big college football weekend, and ultimately that's what we're here to talk about. Halloween is nice, Halloween is fun, but a big college football weekend this past Saturday. And let's start in the biggest of houses in Ann Arbor, Michigan Stadium. They took on the Spartans. They beat the Spartans. Paul Bunyan back with the Wolverines. Obviously, some extracurriculars at the end. We don't necessarily have to discuss those, but they happened. Everyone knows about them. But on the recruiting trail, they had a lot of big visitors, and you liked the impression that they made on those big visitors enough for a couple crystal balls. So, Steve, why don't you tell us about those first and foremost?
Well, if we want to start with the crystal balls, obviously the big one was 5-star quarterback, 24/7 Sports composite 5-star quarterback Jaden Davis. This one's been trending Michigan for a while, but certainly I think Michigan's clearly the team to beat as this recruitment stands now. Might take a couple other visits. I know that the Davis campus talked to Texas A&M about visiting there. That's one program. Strongly considering the likes of Clemson, LSU, North Carolina, Penn State, Tennessee, those are schools he's regularly talking with. Georgia and Ohio State were contenders in this recruitment as well before they each landed quarterbacks. Dylan Raiola with Ohio State, Puglisi with Georgia. But I like Michigan for Jaden Davis, his 4th visit of the calendar year. Quarterback development is a big reason why they love Michigan and Coach Harbaugh and his offense, and certainly the way this football program has played over the last this season and last season has been exciting. And then just the relationships that they've made with Coach Harbaugh, Coach Weiss, JJ McCarthy and his family. I think that Michigan and the culture and the way they treat their players has really stood out to Jaden Davis and his family. He's having an awesome year, Lance. He's completed nearly 74% of his passes for nearly 2,700 yards and 31 touchdowns to just 6 interceptions. So he's having a fantastic year, going to play in the All-America Bowl after his senior year. This would be a major pickup for Michigan, not only solidifying their quarterback room for years to come. J.J. McCarthy, the starter now, I believe he would pass the baton to Jaden Davis down the road, but Jaden Davis is going to be a lightning rod recruiter for whichever school he decides on, and I think that Michigan is the school to beat at this point. Michigan hosted a lot of their top remaining targets here in 2023 and a lot of their favorite targets in 2024. They had 3 offensive linemen on campus, DJ Chester, who we're going to talk about in the next segment, Spencer Fano, and Caleb Lomu. All 3 are guys that I think Michigan needed to make up ground on coming into the weekend, but all guys that certainly are fits at Michigan and guys that these were return trips for them. So with Chester, still, he had a great visit, raved about it. Again, we'll talk about him in the next segment. But Spencer Fano, I felt like Michigan was no better than 3rd coming into the visit. They certainly showed him a good time and made an impression. Or excuse me, Caleb Lomu no better than 3rd for him behind USC and Utah, and maybe that even applies for Fano actually with Oregon and Utah probably being the schools I liked best for him coming into the visit. But with Fano in particular, his family. His dad comes to Michigan every month for work. And I feel like his dad has visited Michigan several times because of that. And they've had a lot of exposure to Michigan. It's a place that they believe in. And so we'll see if distance and things will play a factor for Spencer Fano down the stretch. I've kind of talked with Blair Angulo a little bit behind the scenes, our colleague, that I've been close to putting in a Utah crystal ball for Spencer. Oregon makes us nervous. I think Michigan can make us nervous as well. Roderick Pierce is a Wisconsin defensive line commit that visited. Certainly could see him in Michigan's class if they're pushing. And then Darius Taylor is a Minnesota commit, a running back commit that visited Michigan. And again, I think Michigan's been keeping tabs on him as a senior. He's having a great year. And then Michigan's pushing there. I could easily see him in Michigan's class as well. As far as those 2024s go, there wasn't a prospect on campus more coveted by Michigan than Jordan Marshall, running back from Cincinnati Moeller. Staff absolutely loves him, and he got a chance to watch Blake Corum run for 177 yards in a dominant effort. And I know he really likes Mike Hart and the program itself, and so that's going to be a heavyweight recruiting battle. But Michigan, in my opinion, near the top of the list. For Jordan Marshall. Eddie Turk from a defensive lineman from Illinois is another that I think Michigan's positioned excellently for. Obviously, I logged a 24/7 Sports crystal ball in favor of Michigan for them to land offensive lineman Luke Hamilton. I think that they're in a really good spot for him. And I wouldn't be surprised if they also landed another offensive lineman from the weekend who visited in Kevin Hayward Lance. He's a guy that's highly recruited, but I think Michigan's put their best foot forward there. Bryce West from Cleveland Glenville loved it. Marion Stewart, the list goes on and on. I think that Michigan's the one to beat, as we said, going into the visit for in-state tight end Brady Priestcorn. So a lot of buzz, positive buzz coming out of the weekend for Michigan. For more on that, make sure you're heading over to the Michigan Insider, following Sam Webb, Stevie Lorenz, and Bryce Marich, as Michigan certainly delivered that atmosphere and environment and the culture of the program resonating with a lot of the recruits that were on campus to watch them take apart Michigan State.
Yeah, it was a big game, obviously in the big house, and it was a huge recruiting weekend for the Wolverines. And obviously you mentioned a couple things, running backs, offensive linemen. I want to quickly ask about Lomu and Fano, though. Obviously 2 West Coast guys, and Michigan, obviously a brand that recruits nationally. How much does distance play into their recruitments, do you think? You mentioned schools like Utah, Oregon, USC involved as well. Obviously, all those Pac-12, USC obviously eventually moving to the Big Ten. But how much does distance play a role in the recruitments of those 2 forced offensive linemen?
Well, Lomu, he went out and visited Florida this fall, and also obviously has been to Michigan a couple times. So those are, he's looking at schools out of his footprint, but a lot of buzz coming into the visit was for him around Utah and USC, with USC expected to get the last official visit. Utah, definitely a program that I think is well positioned for him. And then Spencer Fano, same thing, and he's going to commit at the end of his senior year, I believe on the day of the state championship. And talking to Blair, I believe that game is played on Utah's field. So, I don't know. Oregon's obviously given Spencer Fano a lot to think about as well. Coach Clem's one of the best offensive line recruiters in the country. Oregon's got a lot of momentum going on. But again, Michigan is a place where his dad comes from work. they're very familiar with the Wolverines. Sharon Moore, you're not going to find a better guy in college football than Sharon Moore, just as a human, let alone hell of a football coach that can carry around that Joe Moore Award that Michigan won last year for having the best offensive line in college football. And they keep expanding his role at Michigan. And he's an exciting up-and-coming young coach that has a bright future. So Michigan has a lot going for them in these recruitments. But sometimes, prospects genuinely love a school, but they still don't end up going there. We'll see what happens. Michigan will keep fighting, just like they will on the field here, as they're undefeated and squarely in the playoff race, and go from there.
Yeah, of course, playoffs are the goal for the Wolverines, and everyone has their eyes on that final weekend when they take on Ohio State in Columbus. And let's stick with the offensive line. And of course, DJ Chester is a name that you mentioned at Michigan, and a name that is highly coveted. He seems like a decision is coming soon for him. A lot of schools vying for the 4-star offensive tackle. What's the latest in Chester's recruitment, and where do you think he might be leaning as a commitment might be near?
Yeah, so the number 7 offensive tackle in the country, number 55 in the top 247. We love this young man. He's going to play in the All-America Bowl following his senior year, where he was originally planning to decide. But I talked to DJ last night, and he said, look, I felt ready, knowing where I want to go, so why wait? He's not waiting. He's committing on November 3rd. This week, he's going to announce his commitment. And Michigan, he's coming off. Michigan got the last visit. He said it was amazing. It was great, and got to see the big house, and loves Coach Moore. Loves the whole coaching staff, says they're 8-0, and unlike other places it's already established, just can go in there and make it better. But I think LSU's the one to beat going into his decision. I haven't heard differently. We talked about on last week's episode of Whiparound that LSU, they have a chance to finish with a top 5 class here with Brian Kelly and company's first full cycle on the trail. They're currently number 7. And I think Brad Davis and his relationship with him has put LSU in pole position for quite some time for him. I think, he's made some rounds, went to visit South Carolina. He's been to Auburn several times, been to Florida State several times, Ole Miss several times. But LSU, I think that they're the one to beat. And if they do land his commitment, they'll shoot from number 7 to number 4 in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team recruiting rankings. So LSU maybe in the top 5 sooner rather than later, with just a ton of meat on the bone. So many blue chippers out there still for LSU that I think that they're well positioned for. I'll probably forget a few names, but Desmond Ricks, who we said when he reclassified, or maybe right before, we expected LSU to get the last official visit. I like where they stand. All that's playing out that way. Now we'll see what happens on these visits and how the last month of the college football season goes. But LSU, Alabama are the 2 schools I'm looking at the closest for. Desmond Ricks, I like LSU the most right now. Florida, Miami, you don't ignore either of those programs, as they'll certainly make their pushes and their efforts down the stretch for Ricks. But JV and Toviano, is a guy that they're well positioned for, and we talked a lot about it last week on Whiparound. So go back and catch that if you missed it.
Yeah, and
which is not on our YouTube page, so you're gonna have to go to our 24/7 Sports LSU site and get it there.
Yes, absolutely. And look, you got to look with LSU. They're kind of flying under the radar a bit, I think, in the SEC. Obviously, all eyes are on Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. Everyone's obviously questioning what's going on at A&M, but there's LSU at 6-2. 4-1 in the SEC. And you got to give credit where credit is due to Brian Kelly in his first year in Baton Rouge. He's certainly building a great team on the field, and obviously, working wonders on the recruiting trail as well. So let's go over to the defensive side of the ball, the defensive line. Kaden McDonald, someone who's going to make his decision in the next day, I believe.
Today.
There you go. He's going to announce later tonight.
He'll be committed tonight, a few hours after this video drops. It's 9:50 in the morning as we're recording now, but he's committing at 6 p.m. Eastern tonight. This show drops at 2, right, Lance? So it'll be on the podcast
2 Eastern,
earlier,
yes.
though.
It'll be on the podcast earlier, though, for sure.
Yeah.
But 2 Eastern on our YouTube page.
Yeah, Kaden McDonald. I like Ohio State. A lot of the buzz here down the stretch is for the Buckeyes, for Kaden McDonald, who took his official visit to Ohio State in September. Ohio State currently has the nation's number 4 class, and defensive line is really one of the big focal points for the Buckeyes down the stretch here as they try and close this class out strong. And we've made a lot we've talked a lot about the edge rushers and ends that they're in on, right, with Damon Wilson and Mateo Uagalele and Keon Keeley, but this is a guy that they absolutely covet as well. And talking to Kaden in the past, when he's talked about Ohio State, he said the academics, it's a championship football program, and so many opportunities off the field are in Columbus. Coach Day and Coach Larry Johnson have been recruiting him the longest, he said. And they have Jordan Hancock on the team, who's from North Gwinnett High, a defensive back, one of Caden's former teammates. They made it clear Columbus is home. Coach Day is cool. He says he can FaceTime with Coach Day whenever he wants. He called Coach Johnson the GOAT. And just said that he loves everything about Ohio State. That's what he said earlier this month. And then he had a great visit to Ohio State in September too, where that was his third official visit of the process. And he said he saw everything he needed to see on that trip and really enjoyed the game atmosphere. And again, talked about how close he is to the staff. This is one of the most disruptive players in the country, particularly on the interior of the defensive line, and Clemson, Florida, Michigan, Oklahoma. They've all been all in on him here, and it's looking good for Ohio State as of 9:53 in the morning on decision day, Halloween, for Kaden McDonald.
And you talk about disruptive, Steve. Did you see the game that JT Tuimoloau had for Ohio State against Penn State on this past Saturday? I mean, that you want to talk about disruptive. I mean, 2 picks for first and foremost for defensive end is nuts. One of them obviously returned for a touchdown. I think he had 2 sacks and maybe 2 tackles for loss too. I don't remember the exact stat line, but talk about disruptive. And we obviously had him, I think, number 2 in our rankings in the 2021 class. I think number 1 before Quinn Ewers reclassified. But man, what a player, what a disruptive force for the Buckeyes on the defensive end.
Well, he's fantastic, and Kaden McDonald, 118 tackles for loss in 36 high school football games, 31 quarterback hurries, 41 sacks, and he's got some pretty freakish weight room stuff on his Twitter page too. He is an explosive, powerful interior defensive lineman that would be a big addition for any of these finalists here, as all those programs try and maintain or build themselves into college football playoff contenders.
Absolutely a force. Those stats are just eye-popping from Kaden McDonald. One other player that I want to discuss, let's go to 2024. On the offensive side of the ball, the number 3 quarterback in the 2024 class, Julian Sayin, out of California. A decision is likely soon for him too, according to Greg Biggins. What's the latest on Sayin and where he could possibly be leaning as a decision nears?
Well, Greg Biggins, the lead expert on Julian Sayin recruitment and pretty much all things out west recruiting, logged his 24/7 Sports crystal ball in favor of Alabama last night going into Wednesday's decision for Julian Sayin. He logged it Sunday night. I joined him this morning after talking to a source with knowledge of the recruitment. LSU was out there on Thursday, Coach Joe Sloan. I liked where LSU was positioned at one point in this recruitment, but Alabama is a program that he was able to go out and visit here at the end of its process. I think he sees a lot of similarities between him and Bryce Young in the way they're built and the way they play the game. And then certainly Alabama's offense and player development under center and just across the board is something that has put them in great position here going into his decision. He's been able to make the rounds and see his top schools several times. So ready to come off the board and solidify his future somewhere. And I like where Alabama stands as well alongside Biggins. And, Julian, over the course of his high school career has completed nearly 70% of his passes. He's thrown 58 touchdowns, 57 of them over the last 2 seasons, and just 8 picks. So been a prolific passer, and I've seen him live. He's one of the more accurate throwers of the football that I've seen in high school football right now, regardless of grade. And so, one of the more coveted guys down the stretch here. I like Alabama for him. And I think that with LSU, That's one that they pushed hard for, but there's a lot of quarterbacks that they're in on right now. I know Coach Sloan, after going to see Julian Sayin on Thursday, was out to see Jake Merklander on Friday in Savannah, Georgia. So jet sets out west on his way back home, stops in Georgia and sees Jake Merklander play, top 247 quarterback from Savannah, Georgia. And so they're in it for him. They're in it for DJ Lagway. They're in it for a few other arms as well. As it looks like they, are going to, it doesn't seem as promising for Julian Sayin right now as it did earlier.
Yeah, and as if Alabama needs any more great quarterbacks to go in there. And Steve did a great in-depth breakdown on some of the 2024 quarterback dominoes on last Tuesday's college football recruiting show. So make sure to hit up the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel to check out there. We talked Sayin, we talked DJ Lagway, among others, and it's speeding up the 2024 quarterback cycle, Steve. It's speeding up. Obviously, CJ Carr, Dylan Raiola, Ryan Puglisi off the board. You put in a crystal ball for Jaden Davis to Michigan. Now Julian Sayin's going to get off the board too soon. I mean, this is a fast-moving quarterback class for 2024. And if you're one of the blue bloods, you really got to get your guy quick or options are going to run out.
I just think in this class in particular, a lot of these guys that were highly recruited were able to get out and see. First of all, they were identified early. And then they were able to get out and see their top schools so many times. I mean, Dylan Raiola took multiple visits to Georgia and Ohio State, was able to go see USC. Those were some of his top contenders. Jaden Davis has been recruited since basically the 8th grade. He's been to Georgia was first to offer him in 8th grade. Alabama offered him in 8th grade. He's been to Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Michigan now 4 times this year. He's been to these schools countless times. He was at Ohio State several times. Julian Sayin's been able to make the rounds. CJ Carr visited Notre Dame so many times before he committed there. And so one thing we do know, though, is that there will be some quarterbacks that emerge, right? There will be some quarterbacks that we weren't talking about as much right now that are having big junior years that we're going to see rise up our rankings with great junior years and great in-person evals. So, we'll see how it shakes out at the end. I mean, Drew Aller was a 3-star at this time of his high school career when he was a junior and ended up finishing as our number 1 ranked quarterback in the country and is now a true freshman at Penn State. So, we'll see what shakes out. And then obviously, a long way to go before these guys put pen to paper.
100%. And look, evaluations obviously always ongoing. And like you said, more names certainly will rise up the rankings, and more names will certainly, we will certainly have to take notice of more names moving forward. One other guy I know you want to discuss, Steve, and when we talk about freak athletes, he is the epitome of them. Nyckoles Harber, the number 1 athlete in the 2023 class, a 5-star out of the DMV area. What's the latest on Harber, where his recruitment is, any potential visits upcoming? What do you know from him?
Yeah, well, our guy Brian Doan was out to see Harber this past week and was able to report that Harber has locked in his official visit to Maryland for December 9th. And talking to a source with knowledge of that recruitment in Maryland's position, they told me over the weekend that they thought that Maryland was, as I dig this out here, gaining momentum was the exact word used there. And so Maryland and their strong start to the season, proximity to home, are some things that they have going for them in this recruitment, and I know talking to his dad several times in the past, he's always, mentioned Maryland being the home school and the home team and being real close, real nearby. So I think that's something that's always kind of been out there for them right now. And he likes the coaches over there. And we know Loxley has had some exciting closes to some recruitments each and every cycle since he's been at Maryland. And so maybe Nyckoles Harber will be their exciting finish this year. Jason Barham and
they flipped Andre Roy also last year from Penn State at the same time.
Yep. And then they also, as Rakeem Jarrett was one that was certainly kind of a stunner on signing day too.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Mike Loxley has done a great job recruiting at Maryland, and obviously the Terps have had a great year so far here in 2022. So Steve, that's a show. Halloween, obviously, we got to get ready to get our costumes on. We got to get ready to get our candy. Got to get ready to go trick or treating. But a big week 9 for sure. A big weekend this past Saturday. So many things to follow, obviously, as this week goes on too. And I'm sure a bunch of big weekends materializing for next Saturday. Notre Dame, Miami, others to keep an eye on. Of course, Georgia as well, as they host a Tennessee team and what could be the game not only of the SEC year, but the game of the college football year. So a lot going on this week, a lot of commitments to look forward to as well. Steve, it's always a pleasure talking with you here on Monday. And again, happy Halloween. I hope you find some 100 grand bars in your trick-or-treating tonight. I really hope you do. I really hope you do.
Yep, with Miller Lite and the koozie.
Yeah.
You guys take care. Have a great day. Appreciate y'all.
Yeah, remember to like this video and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening as a podcast, make sure to give us a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. So for Steve Wiltfong, I am Lance Glynn. Thanks for listening to the Wiltfong Whiparound. And again, happy Halloween.